Good evening. You're watching Arirang News at 8. It's Tuesday, January 28th here in Korea. Live from Seoul, I am Yoo Ji-hye. We begin this evening with souring relations between Korea and Japan. Seoul strongly denounced Tokyo's decision to bolster its claim the Korean-controlled Dokdo Island in school teaching manuals, warning of unspecified reciprocal countermeasures if the revisions are not withdrawn immediately. Arirang News' Eoh Jin-joo has this report.
How much further can Korea-Japan relations sink? The Japanese government has decided to define the Korea-controlled Dokdo Island and a disputed island chain in the East China Sea as its own territory in its revised manual on government guidelines for teachers in middle and high school textbooks. Seoul's foreign ministry summoned Japanese ambassador to Korea, Koro Bessho, in response and lodged a protest.
I'm here to convey our government's grave opposition to Japan's education ministry, as it today maliciously included its reckless claims in the teaching guidelines for middle schools and high schools.
The Korean government condemned the new teaching guidelines and demanded the plan be withdrawn immediately. If they're not, Seoul vowed to carry out appropriate measures.
The Japanese government has continued to make false claims over Dokdo, which is the first victim of Japanese imperialistic plunder. And trying to teach it to future generations clearly shows that it has not moved beyond the nostalgia of its past imperialism and its evil practice of distorting history.
The new manual unveiled by the Japanese government Tuesday includes a statement that Korea is, quote, illegally occupying Takeshima, which is what Japan calls the islets, and that the Japanese government is protesting the action. On the islands called Senkaku in Japan and Diaoyu in China, Tokyo says it is effectually controlling the island chain and that there are no territorial disputes to resolve.
Japan will educate about Japanese territory and will also look to have friendly relations with surrounding countries. I don't see any contradiction between these two things.
In 2008, the Japanese government included a statement in its manual that called the Dokdo Island issue between Korea and Japan as a, quote, difference in opinion. Even then, when Japan didn't outright claim Dokdo as its territory in the manual, the two nations' ties were under great strain. But now with Tokyo putting their stance into stronger language, it's hard to see relations improving anytime soon. Eoh Jin-joo, Arirang News.
The stock markets throughout Asia on Tuesday gained some of the footing they lost a day before in trading, but a looming announcement by the U.S. Federal Reserve threatens to disturb the calm. Here in Korea, the benchmark Kospi recovered from dropping to a 5-month low in the previous session, picking up more than 0.3% to close at 1917. It fared better than its counterparts in Japan and China, where most of the benchmark indices saw declines. The U.S. Fed's two-day policy meeting that begins Tuesday is being watched with anticipation, as is the possibility of a further cutback in stimulus measures. Also a concern is instability in developing nations, with Turkey and Argentina taking measures this week to prevent steep declines in their currencies. Now, speaking of turmoil in developing countries, ever since the U.S. Fed began to pivot away from the quantitative easing indicating the end of loose U.S. monetary policy, investors have started to think twice about putting their money into emerging economies such as Argentina and Turkey. For an expert's take on the malaise in the emerging markets, we go one-on-one with Dr. Kim Byung-joo, head of K&P Consulting and a longtime commentator on Arirang News. Thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Right, so we're seeing currencies and stock markets tumble from continent to continent. How serious is the contagion threat of emerging market anxiety, and will it get worse?
Actually, yesterday we were all thinking, maybe overall situation may be getting pretty bad. But today the reaction has been mixed. As you just talked about it, in Korean stock market, we saw like a minor slight rise indeed. And throughout Asia, the results have been mixed. For instance, in Japan, we saw a slight drop of the overall main index, while in China, we saw a slight rise of the index itself, while last time I checked, India was showing a little bit of fall and Hong Kong was going up. So very much mixed picture in Asia. So that was a little bit of a sign of relief in a way that, that tells us that the whole world financial market is not exactly in a tailspin at this point. we need several more days to watch. And as you mentioned, the Federal Open Market Committee meeting itself would be a critical point. But yesterday, going back to yesterday was a point of big concern because during the trading day here in Seoul, we saw the 1900 mark being broken for our main index of Kospi, which sent a scary message to a lot of people here. And yesterday, foreign investors were selling off about 515 billion US dollars worth of stocks here in Korea. So it was a strong selling day. And the won was losing its value yesterday, even though today it gained a little bit. So yesterday was a real critical point, and today we had a day of minor relief, to say the least.
The event that we should be looking out for is, of course, the U.S. Fed meeting on Tuesday in Washington time. What can we expect from that meeting, and will the Fed throw emerging markets a bone?
Two possibilities. Here, possibility number one is the U.S. Fed deciding to go ahead with the same pace as announced before, continue on with the gradual tapering of quantitative easing there. And the other possibility is, of course, kind of like a slowing down the pace of tapering itself, considering the overall uncertainty and volatility of the markets that we've been seeing, triggered by the difficulties in the emerging markets such as Argentina. So those two possibilities are there. Looks like, as for now, the analysts around the world seem to be agreeing on the possibility number one, that Fed will actually continue on with the announced pace. And actually, the reason behind for that is financial markets does not like shocks or uncertainty there. So going with the announced pace of tapering itself would be actually a healthier thing to do on the side of Fed in terms of their action. That seems to be the belief. But then again, if they slow down a little bit in terms of the pace of the easing itself, actually it could send a message that U.S. Fed cares about the uncertainties and uneasiness of the emerging market as well. So it could send a positive message as well. So we have very evenly divided possibility, while the majority of the analysts seem to be thinking probably the Fed will go ahead with the stability.
Well, here in the nation, there's an ongoing debate about which party is to blame for the latest crisis, if we may call it, whether it's the emerging markets for their policy mismanagement or the United States. What's your take on that?
Yeah, that's a very interesting debate here in Korea. Earlier part of the uncertainty that we've been seeing for the past few days, a lot of economists were talking about it's all because these emerging markets such as Argentina and Venezuela and others were not managing their economies well enough. But now for the past few days, we were noticing some of the economists coming out saying, well, the root cause of all this, the chaos here has to do with the United States quantitative easing itself. Now, if you ask for my opinion here, my view is that, I mean, the thing is, of course, the excessive liquidity itself is the main cause of the whole turmoil here. But then again, we have to ask a question. That means then the United States should not have taken the action of quantitative easing in the first place? The answer should be no, because we want the U.S. economy to revive as quickly as possible for the sake of entire global economy. And also we want same kind of liquidity provision to the economies that was in trouble, such as European Union and so on. So this excessive liquidity itself was a result of necessary action to revive the economies around the world. So you cannot exactly blame for that one. Then again, at the same time, the emerging markets, of course, when there is excessive liquidity out there, investors around the world will be carefully watching what kind of, which one among the emerging markets would get into trouble when the liquidity gets sucked back into those original financial markets. And there, always those emerging markets that have not, managed their economy carefully enough will actually end up becoming the targets itself. So Korea stands in an interesting place. We're not exactly emerging market, or we are not exactly fully developed market here, but we know what we should do. We should always watch out for our fundamentals here. So economies like Korea that have been carefully watching the fundamentals are okay. And economies like Argentina that have been doing less than careful management of their economy itself get into trouble. So it's just the law of nature in a way for the economies.
And which comes to my next question. How will this affect Korea? Do you think Korean economy hit a rough patch as well?
Well, the thing is, for each day there will be stocks. We'll see stocks rising and falling, right? But overall, fundamentally speaking, the foreign exchange reserve is the critical factor to watch for all of us, those of us who are sitting at home here, as well as the stock investors all around the world. And Korea, we have a large size of foreign exchange reserve in place. Actually, by the end of last year, we had about over 340 billion US dollars amount of foreign exchange reserve in place, which is about 8 to 9 times larger than what Argentina, that got into trouble, had at the same time at the end of last year. So it's a large amount of foreign exchange reserve we have, and for that, because we have that, I think Korea can feel much better about overall turmoil. And if we get into trouble, it will be only after all of this long list of emerging markets have gotten into trouble themselves. So I think we're in a much better position for now.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Dr. Kim, for your insight tonight.
Thank you.
Touch base with journalists, experts, and analysts who are taking the pulse of Asia's heartbeat.
South Korea's defense minister.
In a lively half hour, join Arirang's Eoh Jin-joo for the day's top stories, current affairs, business, technology trends, plus global weather forecasts and more. Arirang News. Every weeknight, live on Arirang TV.
To the disappointment of making progress in bettering inter-Korean ties, North Korea did not respond to the South's offer to meet for working-level talks tomorrow to discuss the possible resumption of reunions for families separated since the Korean War. Now, South Korea expressed its regrets but said there is still time. Hwang Sung-hee has the details.
South Korea's proposal for holding a fresh round of family reunions in mid-February went unanswered by the North on Tuesday. There was much anticipation over North Korea's response, as it had asked the South to leave the inter-Korean hotline open for a little bit longer than usual. But after 2 extra hours, Pyongyang told Seoul that the hotline may be closed for the day, with no mention of the South's proposal. South Korea had offered Monday to hold reunions for families separated since the Korean War from February 17th to the 22nd. If the North had given a response, the two Koreas would have met for working-level talks on Wednesday at the truce village of Panmunjom to sort out the details. Seoul's Unification Ministry expressed regret over Pyongyang's failure to give a swift response, saying that the aging family members divided by the 38th parallel are eagerly waiting to see each other again. The dates proposed by South Korea to hold the reunions may be holding the North back from giving an answer. Seoul offered to hold the humanitarian event in the 3rd week of February, just before it begins its annual joint military drills with Washington, which the North views as war games. Experts say Pyongyang could be mulling a counter-proposal for the dates of the reunion. Millions of Koreans were separated from their loved ones when the country was divided more than 6 decades ago. Around 72,000 South Koreans are on a waiting list for a chance to meet their families one last time, but it's been 3 years now since the last reunions. Seoul's Unification Ministry left open the possibility of hearing from North Korea on Wednesday, saying the working-level talks on the reunions can still take place on Thursday or immediately after the Lunar New Year holiday. Hwang Sung-hee, Arirang News.
And the two Koreas have launched a trial run of the new border entry system at the inner-Korean Kaesong industrial complex in the north. The Unification Ministry says that some 20 South Korean workers entered the zone this Tuesday morning using the new radio frequency identification system. It enables them to travel in and out of the complex at any time of the day they're allowed to be there and keeps them from having to fax a list of names a day before just to cross the border. The government expects the new system to reduce the travel time and resolve communication inconveniences. A full implementation will come after a 2-week trial period following additional consultations with the North. The quarantine officials appear to be fighting a losing battle as they attempt to contain the spread of bird flu in the country. An increasing number of suspected cases are popping up in areas that were previously unaffected by the virus. Our Kwon So-ah has the latest.
2 confirmations of the highly pathogenic avian influenza virus were made on Tuesday. One at a duck farm in Jincheon, which is in Korea's central Chungcheongbuk-do province, and another further south in Cheonan, Chungcheongnam-do province. This has prompted authorities to decide to cull all ducks and chickens within 500-meter and 3-kilometer radiuses of the affected farms respectively. A duck farm in Seocheon, Chungcheongnam-do has a suspected case, as does a chicken farm in the city of Pyeongtaek in Gyeonggi-do province. Although authorities are saying that preliminary autopsy results suggest there's a good chance the chickens were not contaminated with the AI virus. While confirmed or suspected flu cases have hit the Jeollado, Chungcheongdo, and Gyeonggi-do provinces so far, officials in Gyeongsangnam-do in the southeast of the country say migratory bird droppings have tested positive for a flu virus, but it's not yet sure whether it is the avian influenza virus. The Ministry of Agriculture, Food and Rural Affairs says that in past bird flu epidemics, the virus has often broken out in the west coast regions and gradually spread inland. Meanwhile, the Agriculture Minister Lee Dong-pil said the spread can be halted if everyone works together.
I ask for your active cooperation in preventive measures during trips to your hometowns this Lunar New Year holiday, even if it's inconvenient.
Minister Lee asked people to avoid visiting poultry farms and migratory bird habitats if possible. Officials from the government, the ruling Saenuri Party, and the Presidential Office of Cheongwade called an emergency meeting on Tuesday to coordinate efforts as they try to stem the spread of the bird flu outbreak. Kwon So-ah, Arirang News.
Amid mounting concerns over increasingly severe air pollution in the capital, the National Assembly's Environment Committee has unveiled plans they hope will help us all breathe a little easier. Our Kim Young-gil has more.
The particles are thinner than a hair, and they've been blowing into Seoul for months, choking pedestrians and lowering visibility. The fine particulate matter is officially known as PM 2.5, after their size, 2.5 micrometers in diameter or smaller. Once they get into the lungs, they could cause cardiovascular and respiratory diseases, lung cancer, and can even be deadly. The Parliamentary Environment Committee says it's working on plans for dealing with the problem and offered a progress report on Tuesday.
Starting in 2015, the government will regulate PM 2.5 pollutants as hazardous. These include vehicle exhaust, smoke from factories, nitrogen, and sulfur oxide gas emissions. But we also plan to regulate restaurants that use charcoal grills.
Korea's environment minister believes that of the 23,000 tons of particulate matter emitted in metropolitan areas in 2010, some 22% were from restaurants that use charcoal grills. Seoul saw its highest dust level in 2012 with 25.2 micrograms per cubic meter of air, while Paris and New York have 15 and 13.9 micrograms respectively. The World Health Organization's recommended level is 25 micrograms per cubic meter per day, but some studies have shown there is no PM level at which there is no damage to health.
To better manage the city's air pollution, the government plans to limit ultra-fine dust levels to 20 micrograms per cubic meter in urban areas starting 2015.
The government is also aiming to increase the ratio of eco-friendly cars to 20% by 2024. It says it will also issue toxic dust forecasts twice a day starting in 2015 and will increase the number of toxic dust monitoring stations from 30 to 34. To combat Korea's growing air pollution problem, the Parliamentary Environment Committee plans to expand its research into ultra-fine dust. It might also form a joint research group with China and Japan. Kim Young-gil, Arirang News.
The Korean government issued special pardons for nearly 6,000 people who committed minor crimes in the course of trying to make a living. Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-won said Tuesday that a total of 5,925 people were pardoned ahead of the Lunar New Year holiday, which starts Thursday. In addition, about 2.9 million traffic violators will be exempted from their penalties. However, the list of beneficiaries will not include people caught driving under the influence. Prominent politicians, businessmen, and offenders of violent crimes will also be excluded from the list of those pardoned. The special pardons are the first since President Park Geun-hye took office last year, and Korean presidents traditionally issue them to commemorate major national holidays. And months after allegations surfaced that a far-left political party was staging an armed rebellion against the South Korean government, the legal process of disbanding the party got underway on Tuesday. Kim Hyun-ji reports on the first day of the unprecedented trial.
In the first day of the high-profile trial on Tuesday, Justice Minister Hwang Kyo-won made his case against the far-left Unified Progressive Party, while UPP chairwoman Lee Jung-hee spoke up in defense of her party. The case represents the first time the government has attempted to dissolve a political party. The cabinet petition to disband the leftist party was filed in early November, a few months after a number of UPP members, including lawmaker Lee Seok-gi, were arrested on charges of plotting an armed revolt against the South Korean government. Lee and other Unified Progressive Party members are currently standing trial, but are denying the insurrection charges and that they ever even praised North Korean ideology. Tuesday's trial was focused on whether it is lawful to dissolve the UPP, and if so, on what grounds. The Justice Ministry called for uprooting the leftist party, saying that the UPP seeks to install North Korean socialism, which violates the basic democratic order of the South Korean constitution. It also demanded the court put a temporary stop to the UPP's activities, as the party may attempt to subvert the government, as seen in the case of lawmaker Lee Seok-gi. The Unified Progressive Party rebutted the government's claim that their party is unconstitutional. It said its style of progressive democracy is aimed at overcoming the ills of capitalism, not following North Korean socialism. The UPP also claimed that the government is trying to suppress a minor opposition party out of a desire to drive its own political interests. UPP lawmaker Lee Seok-gi is awaiting a verdict on charges of plotting to overthrow the government. That verdict is expected to come in February, which observers say is likely to influence the direction of the Constitutional Court's ruling on the UPP dissolution case. Kim Hyun-ji, Arirang News.
We are just 2 days away from the start of the Lunar New Year holiday, but the celebratory atmosphere can already be felt in nooks and corners of Seoul. Our cultural correspondent Park Ji-won was at the scene of one of the city's many events.
The Lunar New Year holiday is one of the most celebrated times of the year in Korea, and about 150 expats had a special chance to kick off the festivities in advance. They took part in various holiday traditions, from wearing the traditional Korean clothing hanbok to learning how to properly perform a New Year's bow to elders.
앉을 때 한 손을 이렇게 오른손으로 앉으셔서 이제 일어날 때는 좀 어렵고요. 근데 재밌었어요.
An ancestral worship ceremony the Koreans typically perform on Lunar New Year Day was demonstrated, as well as traditional Korean outdoor games like 제기차기 and 투호.
We don't have our families in here, but we have the opportunity to enjoy with friends and learn everything about Korean.
한국 사람이랑 같이 이렇게 세배도 하고 게임 많이 하고 뭔가 가족처럼 있는 거 느끼고 좋았습니다.
The Seoul Global Center invited the expats to share in the fun and joy of the holiday as they will be away from their families during this holiday season.
설날 시간이 제일 자기 나라 생각나고 외롭잖아요. 그래서 서울에서 외국인 위한 설날 행사 많이 있어서 전통적인 문화 느낄 수 있고.
Participants also shared a meal of dokdo or rice cake soup the Koreans traditionally eat on Lunar New Year morning.
And this event is just one of the many festive activities organized by the Seoul City government in celebration of the Lunar New Year holiday.
Royal palaces will be open for free on Lunar New Year's Day, and many traditional cultural performances will be offered for free at more than 20 museums, parks, and traditional theaters in Seoul during the holiday season that runs until the end of this week. Park Ji-won, Arirang News.
yet another warm winter day here in Korea. And for more, let's go over to our Kim Bo-kyung at the Weather Center. Bo-kyung.
Good evening, Ji-hye. Well, readings will continue to remain above the seasonal average range through the Lunar New Year holiday. Currently, the nation is under the influence of a high-pressure system from China, which is why we're seeing clear skies across the map. Now, keep in mind that although temperatures will remain favorable, there looks to be showers over the extended weekend, except on Lunar New Year Day, which is Friday. Other than that, a dry weather warning has been issued in Gyeongsang Dokdo Province, so please watch out for forest fires. Taking a look at tomorrow's readings, Seoul starts off the day at -5 degrees with a high of 7. Meanwhile, Gwangju and Busan make it to 13. Moving on to other regions, Daejeon and Dokdo peak at 9 degrees, while Kumgang tops out at 0. Well, that's all for now, and back to you, Ji-hye.
And that's a broadcast on this Tuesday evening. I'm Yoo Ji-hye in Seoul. Thanks for watching.